Hi there, class. It's been a little while since I've done a video, so I thought that might be good. Um, so we're covering Indigenous people this week and different issues they face. Um, our reading materials covered some Asian culture, some um, Native American culture. So I thought I would talk with you a little bit about um, my experience with Native Alaskan culture. Um, as I think I might have mentioned before, I lived in Alaska and taught. I didn't teach. I was a mental health therapist back then for about 3 years. So I feel really lucky that I got to meet a lot of Native Alaskan people and learn a bit about the history. Um, and then, as I mentioned, I was doing mental health there, so um, I got to see, as so many of you do, how all these issues come into play in people's real lives, right? Um, and so, what we're doing in this class is connecting all of that real lived experience with policies. Um, I think it's really interesting. I don't know if you all agree or have observed this, but I think it's really interesting that so many people shy away from politics and almost think it's like this independent thing from our lives. But hopefully, you will agree after having gotten this far in the class that politics is really wrapped up in so much of our lives, and I don't think anybody is really immune from when you're a baby, your whole life, cradle to grave. There are issues in policy that affect everybody. So anyway, going back to Native Alaskan community and how these issues affected them. So very similar to, let's see, what article was it that we have posted here? Native American boarding schools. Um, so this was done a lot for Native Alaskan communities as well. Um, you know, young people were made to go to these schools, and not only that, there were also missionaries that came to villages, and that kind of erased a lot of the culture as well. Um, uh, Not necessarily that religion. Um, I don't want to make it sound like religion is bad, but there were just a lot of things done that basically kind of erased a lot of Native Alaskan culture. Um, so it's really wonderful that we still have some elderly Native Alaskans who are able to pass down the culture. They've taught it to their kids and some of the grandkids. Like like any other culture, a lot of the grandkids these days um, aren't as interested, I think, but but definitely some of them, and hopefully all of them to some extent have connection. Um, Sorry, I think I'm meandering a bit. So um, let's see, what are some specific examples I can give you all? So in certain villages, even alcohol is considered illegal. And one major problem that I saw in the villages that I lived and worked in was that once you had a legal record, it was hard to get a job. And with uh, a lot of folks in rural villages in Alaska are living 2 or maybe 3 generations in a home with 1 or 2 rooms, bedrooms. So really cramped quarters. And when funds are low, and in the winter people get cooped up, um, and so my observation was that all of these issues kind of compounded on each other. So that the policy issue of making substances illegal is just one example that had dire consequence can have dire consequences because it's who's to say what leads to what? Do these dire consequences lead to substance use and abuse? does substance use and abuse lead to legal troubles? Maybe both. But that's just one example. Let's see, what are some other examples I can think of policy issues? Um, hmm, hmm, hmm. One issue that I think is somewhat positive is that reproductive care, from from what I recall, was pretty strong. Um, Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. I think that's what FASD stands for. Um, if you're not too familiar, is caused when women consume alcohol during pregnancy. It can have really awful consequences for the baby. Um, so sometimes they can be relatively minor, but they can be, there's a whole spectrum. They can be rather severe. Um, so sometimes I'm sure you've seen that unfortunately sexual violence is rather common in Alaska. Um, and so I have definitely seen cases where a woman, especially a woman who has FASD and their cognitive abilities can be lower, they can be taken advantage of a little bit more easily. So I have seen cases where a woman had to make a tough decision about whether or not to keep a baby. Even a woman, a young woman, a child under 18. And so from what I recall, reproductive care I think was rather strong, and there was maybe not ability right in their village, but they could get flown to the nearest major city and get the reproductive care they needed. Um, and they have the ability. A lot of our states, as you may have seen, the policies are changing, the laws are changing throughout the country, that reproductive care is trying to be limited. Even within the social work community, there are some social workers who feel their religion makes them feel conflicted about this, about abortion, to be candid. Um, but I would say many to most social workers believe that's really important for women to have the ability um, to make that decision, because as we know, um, poverty can be cyclical. Um, let's see. So that's another policy issue that relates to real life. And that's women and everywhere, but that's definitely one that I felt like was pretty important in Alaska for Native Alaskans. Those are just a couple of examples. Hopefully this might have been a little bit interesting, I hope. And if any of you have worked with Indigenous populations and you have anything you want to share with the class or just with me, please let us know. I love our profession so much for many different reasons, but one of the reasons that I love our profession is that, um, our profession is so broad. There's so many different places to work and people to work with, and I think we all have a lot of wisdom to share with one another. So I think that's it for today. I hope you all are doing okay. It's a really tough time right now, and I hope you're doing the best you can, and I hope you and your families are well. Take care.